Hey, what's going on, everybody? Appreciate you for tuning in. It's another Tuesday, which means it's another edition of the On the Ball podcast. Tonight, it's just going to be Brett and myself. But look, we still have some great topics to get into that I'd kind of be interested to talk to you, Brett, about. So those of you who are tuned in, obviously we want to hear from you. So anything we talk about, make sure you jump in the comments and let your opinions known, and we'll definitely go back and forth with you if you agree with us or if you don't. It's all good. But before we even get into our first topic, we got Brett, guard of three. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? How are you doing today?
I'm good. Can't complain. It's been an interesting kind of sports day, which we'll definitely get into some of it. Because like I said, we have some NBA related stuff to talk about, some NFL as well, because we are right there on the cusp of the start of the NFL season. So we'll kind of look at some preseason stuff once again. But I did want to get started with let's start with Carmelo Anthony, because Carmelo Anthony made some news, and I have the quote pulled up so I can let people know who are watching or just listening in as to what he said, to give you some context from where he's coming from. Maybe that shapes your opinion. So he was basically asked, would he trade his gold medals in for an NBA ring? Hey, what's going on, Jory? Appreciate you being in here already. So he said no, because when we talk about a global sport, for me, a medal means something totally different than an NBA championship. They both have their own separate meanings, but winning a gold medal, it's the passion, the pride that you have, not just for a city or a state, for a whole nation, for a whole country you're winning for. It's a different level of, I would say, pride that you have to have when you're wearing USA across your chest, or you're wearing Lithuania across your chest. It's totally different feeling than Knicks or New York across your chest. So that, and like I said, that's his full quote. So I don't want to take him, out of context or anything like that. How do you feel about what Carmelo Anthony said? Because he did say, like, comparing the two of them are like apples to oranges. You agree with what he had to say?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with what he had to say. Melo was a guy who took a lot of pride in playing for the Olympics, and getting those Olympic golds clearly meant a lot to him. It it is really tough to get an Olympic gold medal. Granted, obviously being on Team USA basketball, a little bit easier than most back in the day, but they still had to put in the work to get those. Had some great wars against Spain. So overall, I don't have an issue with what he said. It's not like he was sitting there ripping on the NBA finals or anything. So he didn't say anything disrespectful. So if that's what he thinks, I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Troy
What's up,
said he
nerdy
didn't
dad?
take the Lyles route, so I'm very glad. Yeah. I mean, look, it could just be that he won his medals because he has what, three golds and silver, I believe, and he doesn't have an NBA title. Like, we all know that. So obviously, the experience of winning the gold medals, he's experienced that, and that's what he's speaking on, as opposed to an NBA title, which he never accomplished. Like, I know Stephen A. and a few people were like up in arms about it, but it's kind of like you said. Like, if you win a gold medal, that is a special thing as an athlete. So to knock him for not wanting to trade that in for an NBA title, like, why? Like, even if you're not winning an NBA title, you're still winning, on in a high level, in the Olympics or something like that. I mean, Jory did mention the Lyles aspect of it, which I don't know. Maybe this would play into his argument. I'm sure he probably sat back and looked at this and was like, see, Carmelo gets it, because as an Olympian, you're a world champion, because that's where Noah Lyles comes from. NBA title, you're just uh, it's just like a domestic league. So I'm sure Noah Lyles is sitting back cheesing about it. But yeah, I agree. I don't have any issue with what Carmelo said. I feel like Carmelo's been he
I,
was
I,
refreshing during the Olympics.
Yeah, I'll say that, Jory. Like, yeah, at least Melo isn't a generational hater like Noah Lyles. I still couldn't believe him like getting offended that they invited him to the Anthony Edwards unveiling of his shoe. That whole story was insane. He's wondering why he doesn't get a shoe. It's like, dude, ain't nobody like wondering, like, yo, when are those Noah Lyles ones coming out?
Exactly.
Nope.
Noah Lyles is doing way too much. I get it. You're a track athlete. Most people know you every 3.5 years when you're doing like Olympic qualifying, and people tune into track and field and they go, "Oh yeah, Noah Lyles, there he is." But like he needs to quit with the whole beef with the NBA. Like just let it go. Like just go do your thing.
That's what I think he's got to understand. Like Jory just said, like he's relevant once every 4 years. Call that man leap year. But like Anthony Edwards plays every year, making exciting plays. He's fresh in everybody's minds every year.
Mm-hmm.
Noah Lyles ain't fresh in anybody's mind unless he's dropping clickbait headlines, and he understands that. So credit to him for trying to, stay relevant. But
yeah,
he really is doing way too much at this point, though. Like, cut it out. I highly doubt you have no clue who Nikola Jokic is.
Right. Come on, man. I mean, we know Jokic isn't necessarily the in-your-face type of NBA player, but come on, you had to see the Gru commercial at least once or twice. Like you know who he is. That was a funny little ad for him. Want somebody to pop on one good time. Mink. Yeah, so Jory's not really on board with Lyles either. It's very easy not to vibe with Noah Lyles. He makes it easy for people. Yeah, so like I said, I feel like it's acceptable with what Carmelo Anthony said. He has his NBA career, which is Hall of Fame career, but there is something about winning a medal for Team USA that's just a little different. Like neither answer he could have came up with would be necessarily wrong or right, unless he just was like disrespectful to the Olympics or something, or like the countries he played against or something like that. So I think Melo took a very acceptable route in his answer. Let's see. I mean, anything you want to add about Carmelo? Because like I said, that was just a little quick subject for us to get started with.
No, like I said, at the end of the day, he said nothing wrong. I'm cool with him. I've always loved Melo, lived in New York during the Melo years, so I definitely appreciated everything he's done for the game. So we're very respectful answer from Melo.
Right. All right. So sticking with basketball. Now, the NBA, they did release a lot of their primetime schedules and all that, but I feel like we can save that for other weeks. But I did look at the list of nationally televised games for each of the teams, and I have seen some people have an issue with some of the teams as much as they're going to be on TV. But like I said, I feel like we can talk about a couple of them and kind of get your thoughts on how much they're showing certain teams and whether they deserve it or whatever.
The Lakers and their 39 national televised games.
Look, we already knew that the Lakers are going to be up there. They have the branding, they have the power of LeBron, so whatever. Now, if you're a Wizards fan, you get one whole nationally televised game, so you better circle that one on your calendar, gear up for it, and I don't even know if they would watch it anyway because it's the Wizards. It is what it is. So they have the least amount of nationally televised games. Like you said, the Lakers have the most, and the Celtics have the second most, which I don't think you can necessarily disagree with either one of those being up at the top. The Warriors are third. Do you have an issue with that?
Not really. Like, Steph Curry's a draw. He's going to draw money. He's going to draw viewers. Overall, I don't think they really got much worse or better than last year. So I think this is going to be about the equivalent of watching them last year. So it's whatever. Steph's always going to draw eyes to the product. I know they lost Clay, but I think between all their additions, they probably at this point replaced his shooting and defense, or whatever's left of his defense. But overall, I don't have an issue with it. Steph's exciting, and I don't think they'll be worse than last year.
Right. And look, that first time when Clay goes up against them, that's going to be must-see TV because, you'll want to know, will Clay be especially on his game that night to show Golden State was wrong for letting him go. You figure that Steph and Draymond are going to want to put on a show as well to be like, yeah, we love you, but we're good without you now. So that's going to be a game I'll be waiting to see. The Knicks are fourth most, which we know, the market of New York, the fact that they're relevant, they have a guy in Jalen Brunson that's pretty marketable. Yeah, that makes sense as well.
Yeah, they made the biggest, arguably one of the biggest additions of the offseason, if not the biggest. I would say the biggest, but Paul George didn't move. But they traded for Mikal Bridges, so everyone's excited to see how that goes. So that tracks.
Yeah. Next up, you have the Mavericks. I mean, they just made it to the finals. Once again, makes a lot of sense. You put them on TV a lot the following year.
Dwight Powell draws money.
Yes, he does. The Nuggets has the sixth most television appearances. Do you think that's low, or based on the teams ahead of them, you okay with that?
It's hard for me to find fault with any of these teams so far. Okay. Like the Nuggets, at least, are still going to be a top 3 seed in the West, probably at worst 4. I'm guessing they won't fall off too hard losing KCP. At the end of the day, it's tough to really find fault with most of these because the Lakers will probably be a play-in team, and they have 39. I get it. It's the branding. It's them having LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But when a play-in team is getting 39 games, it's hard for me to fault them for giving another uber talented, actual, legitimate contender the 6th most games. So overall, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Then to round out the top 10, you have the Sixers, the Suns, the Timberwolves, and the Bucks. Is there a team that you probably would have liked to see more that should be in the top 10 that isn't?
I think OKC should be in there. I don't think you mentioned them, and I think they should take the spot of the Suns because the Suns are terrible. I'm a fan of some of the. I'm still a big believer in Devin Booker. I love Devin Booker. The issue is they're playing him out of position. He's not a natural point guard. He should be looking to be aggressive in attack mode, and that's when he's at his best. But putting him at point and forcing him to try to find everybody else's shots too just neutralizes what he does best. Kevin Durant's great. Everything after that just falls off a cliff so hard. Don't want to watch Bradley Beal 30 times a year. I don't know if I want to watch him 3 times a year. So, I hate that the Suns are in the top 10, and I really wish a team like OKC would kick them out.
Okay, I feel like that's fair. I mean, the Thunder were 11th, so they weren't too far out of the top 10. But I can agree with you. I'd rather watch the Thunder. Look, the Suns, I feel like we know what they're going to be. They're probably going to be what they were last year. They'll play some games against really good competition, and you'll be like, you know what they need? A legit point guard. They did sign Tyus Jones in the offseason, but I'm assuming that's going to be in a backup role. That's kind of what he normally is. So they're going to run out because they tried Beal last year, which was a disaster because Beal couldn't stay healthy. Booker, look, if your choice is Booker or Beal, yeah, I'd probably let Booker do it over Beal. But like you said, that takes away from what makes Booker Booker.
Yes, the real question are the Suns is Budenholzer bold enough to move the $50 million man and Beal to the bench? I don't think they do that. They probably step in and say we can't pay somebody $50 million to come off the bench. So it's tough.
Question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So overall, I love the addition of Tyus Jones, but yeah, I don't see him starting. The Wizards, who were like perennially tanking, wouldn't play Beal at point guard if that shows
Right.
how much faith they have in him.
Exactly. So Nerdy Dad, appreciate you tuning in. Put in favorite NBA team. So I will just say I am a Celtics fan, so that's definitely my favorite team. And I feel like Nerdy Dad's probably from your channel, so he probably knows who you're a fan of. But I mean, you can
Milwaukee Bucks.
There you go. Now follows it up with another great question: least favorite team. Now this one probably might take a little bit of thought. My least favorite team. I mean, you go ahead if you know it.
It's whoever's playing ugly basketball. I don't actually have a least favorite team, but it depends who plays a style of basketball that's inefficient and just not like aesthetically pleasing. Like for years, it was the Toronto Raptors because it was just all 6'10" guys running at the rim and just chucking up contested mid ranges, and I absolutely hated it. Mm-hmm. So, but right now, it really just might be the Phoenix Suns. I really hate watching them.
I mean, I think that's a pretty legit answer there. I mean, yes, I feel like watching them play, for me, it was almost like anybody with James Harden on it, because I've never been a fan of watching James Harden play. I mean, Celtics fandom in me, least favorite teams like the Heat, because Heat fans just
Heat culture
just get on my nerves. Yeah, Heat fans, Heat culture, they tend to get on a lot of Celtics fans' nerves, but I do respect like what they have going on. Yeah, least favorite team. Because I do agree, the Raptors were horrific to watch, and since they were in the Celtics division, I had to watch them more than I wanted to. Because I definitely agree with you. Like the whole 6'8" and up lineup with Siakam being forced to bring the ball up, and he has like no left hand, and it was just like, how's Nick Nurse getting away with this?
Everyone makes fun of your guy for not having a left hand. Clearly, has never watched Pascal Siakam go left.
Like Jaylen Brown has like legit highlights using his left hand. If you can point out Siakam ever using his left hand, then I'd probably have $10 for you. He just uses it to push off a little when he drives to right, and he puts his layups in. But hey.
And all of his layups come after a spin move. I swear that man that's the only post move he knew in Toronto was just spin move. Him and Aaron Gordon are two players that I think the only move that they knew for the longest time was just spin move. They're like me playing 2K. Just, spin to the left every time or spin to the right.
Right, exactly. Well, at least Aaron Gordon was like athletic above the rim. Siakam's not even that athletic either. So I'd probably go with the Raptors as least favorite. I mean, they're changing up their team a little bit, but I mean, appreciate the question, Nerdy Dad. Feel free to throw some more out there. So I did say what the Thunder were 11th. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'll say plus. I was so happy when we beat the Suns in the finals. That finals made me not a huge fan of Chris Paul. Don't tell our boy Chris, but I actually have beef with CP3.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of people do, because Chris Paul is labeled as like this great floor general and stuff. And look, if you remember Chris Paul at Wake Forest, like he got in cheap shots when he could. And that was one thing. Like he was a terrible cheap shot artist at Wake Forest. And that was a reason why I wasn't a big fan of him. And he does it in the NBA, but it's like he gets away with it because he was on the Players Association and everybody calls him point guard and all this. So yeah, I can see what you're saying.
That's why
he agrees as well.
Well, let's say they if you remember in Game 5 when Drew Holiday threw up the lob to Giannis, that's why I have beef with Chris Paul. It will stem from the fact that if you watch that, Chris Paul gets back to defend and almost like tries to shove Giannis out of the air while he's going up for the lob.
Mm-hmm.
I was so mad, like I was so hyped, but I'm like yelling at the TV, like "Screw you, Chris Paul, for trying that in a very
Right.
crowded bar." I was so mad at him, and I still hold it against him. So
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I understand because I was kind of that way. I believe it was Jay Crowder because the lob when Gordon Hayward, got hurt, the horrific injury that everybody remembered. I think Jay Crowder was the one who was like under him on the lob, and I was like, why would you go there? So for a little bit, I couldn't stand Jay Crowder, even though he was a former Celtic at that point. But I get it. Like plays like that can be very dangerous. Nerdy Dad with another question. I see Nerdy Dad's trying to get certain fan bases worked up with this one. Greatest basketball player of all time.
this one's easy. It's Al Horford. Capped it
I
off with a
mean,
ring.
obviously, yes. uh, I mean, Nerdy Dad. I still say it's Michael Jordan. I know that's becoming like less and less popular all of a sudden, but he is the greatest player to me.
And I agree with him.
Right.
Like I said,
Yeah. Appreciate the questions, Nerdy Dad.
but it's the first one. Everybody's behind Al Horford. Remember that.
Right. So Thunder, the Spurs have the 12th most. You can understand Wemby and all that. They did get Chris Paul as well. So I guess to see those two work together. Then you have the Pacers, Clippers. Clippers. I mean, the new arena, I guess, is enough to give you a reason to watch. The Grizzlies at 15. I think it's interesting because if Ja Morant were around past couple of seasons, they probably would be higher up on the list.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's coming back from the injury and everything, they're probably a bit lower. So I expect them to be higher on the list next year because he is a dynamic player, even though he does have some flaws in his game, but he is an exciting player that plays above the rim.
I feel like they'll find a way to flex in Memphis for a couple more primetime games. Like they'll find a way. Like I'm sure they'll take the Wizards one primetime game away from them at some point for like Memphis.
I mean, you got to give the Wizards at least one, so then you can remember. Oh yeah, Alex Sarr was the first.
Do we?
I mean, you get the pool party once, right? You get it once. That's enough. Most overrated
player.
Nerdy Dad's got good questions tonight.
I was not prepared for this. Kidding. I'm always prepared for this. Most overrated player. A lot of people. See, it's funny because I know the popular answer for right now was Trae Young. But now I'm almost starting to think that man is almost overhated. Because Trae Young is the popular answer for most overrated player. But he does do a lot of good, but I see a lot of people trying to talk about him on Twitter like he's just the worst basketball player to ever exist and he does nothing good. Like it's almost like a loop where he's wrapped around so overhated he's almost underrated at this point.
I might be one of those who may hate on Trae Young a little bit.
I know you are. I know you're all good. You acknowledge he still does good on the court. There are people that just think he's totally useless.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. I would say overrated player for me. This is a name, once again, may not be a popular one. I do think Jimmy Butler is a bit overrated. And I say that because of his, I don't know, kind of like laid back attitude to the regular season. And then we've seen him in playoff games completely disappear for like 3.5 quarters. And then he puts together one really good stretch of like 6 minutes, and people, for whatever reason, forget that he disappeared most of the game. And all of his antics and everything, I get that, they put him in commercials and everything like that. Still got to remember, he hasn't really won anything. And I get, being the 8th place team, knocking off the Celtics did a lot for him, but he didn't finish the job. So for me, Jimmy Butler is now Jory, very close to the top of the list on mine is James Harden as well. So that's also a good one.
The overrated question.
What's up, Marika?
The overrated question for me is always so difficult because it depends who you talk to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I really overrate any player necessarily. Like, I have an answer for this, but I'd have to go historical. Most overrated player in NBA history, I actually think the number one answer just might be Dennis Rodman.
Okay.
Because everybody wants to put him on as a top 10 power forward of all time when he's closer to 30 than he is 10. Let's throw that out there. But it's tough for me with the overrated question because it depends who I'm talking to. Because a lot of people properly rate, underrate. So I just try to depends, use the context. But the one guy that I see continuously get overrated, and I'll go in all of NBA history, Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, Rodman is an interesting to rate because it's like his younger days with Detroit seemed like he was more of a dynamic player. But then as he got older, he just became an elite rebounder, which obviously is a big aspect of the game. But it's like the elite rebounding, the off the court personality, which that in itself is Hall of Fame level for as much attention as he brought to himself off the court. But I guess I could see it when you're thinking of like top 10 power forwards. Like there's a lot of really good ones that do multiple things.
And even though I get it, the main argument is, of course, with him half the time, he won 5 rings. He won 5 rings is like a 4th option. Is like a 5th option. He was an elite defender. He's an elite rebounder. But is he really a better basketball player than a guy like Chris Webber? No, he's not. He really isn't.
Right.
Is he a better basketball player than someone like Chris Bosh? No, he really isn't. So
I think Bosh is wildly underrated as well.
Right. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, when you look at him, even the Bulls, they cut his minutes heavily into the playoffs compared to the regular season. His production dipped and everything. So in clutch time, he was never out there. So overall, yeah, that's just my mini Dennis Rodman rant. I think overall, just too many people overrate that man.
Yeah, I can see that. Jory cut me deep with this one. I think Paul Pierce is a little overrated. Maybe some of his foolishness has infiltrated me. I do think Paul Pierce post career, I feel like I could see where that's coming from because a lot of stuff he said, I think people have looked at his career and go, why are you saying the things that you do, especially the being better than Dwayne Wade and all this kind of stuff. Which look, someone who watched Paul Pierce a lot, he was a bucket. I feel like was a pretty good defender, and he had big playoff moments. I do agree some of the things he says is just crazy to me, but hey, it's the wild take age of social media, so why not? I mean, I guess, Brett, do you agree Pierce being a little overrated?
I think Paul Pierce overrates Paul Pierce. I think for the longest time, he was properly rated by a majority of everybody. I think the real guy that overrates Paul Pierce is Paul Pierce. No, you were not. Yeah, you were very good. You were very good. No doubt about it. One of the best forwards in the league coming up. But you were not better than Paul Pierce. I mean, sorry, Dwayne Wade. That was never a thing. But overall, I don't think he's overrated. I think one person overrates him, and that's himself. But I think he's been properly rated throughout his career.
Yeah.
Although 2K did overrate him. That in 2K1, I saw this great thing. It was Paul Pierce year by year overall 2K ratings. It was like 2K1, he was an 82 overall. And then the next year, he was a 98 overall, which was hilarious to me. I'm like, what did he do in 2002 that got like a 16-point jump?
I'm trying to think. Oh, was that the Eastern Conference Finals run where they lost to the Nets?
Yeah, I think it must have been. If he's getting that big of a jump, that must have been.
Yeah. I think that was it. I mean, he was pretty good that season, but yeah, I don't see that big of a jump happening. So, yeah, it's Paul Pierce. At this point, that's all you say. He says something, you go, "Well, that's Paul." I guess just to round up this list, got the Pelicans at 16, Cavs 17, the Heat at 18. I'm sure they're mad about that in Miami. Got the Kings 19, the Magic at 20. I would have a problem with that. I feel like the Magic should be on TV a bit more than that. They're a good young team. You figure you would use the nationally televised games to bring a bigger audience into the young players. So 20th most doesn't sit right with me for the Magic. I guess, do you feel the same? Or
I wish they were on TV more. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. They're going to run in transition. It's going to be a fun, dynamic team. Their offense can get a little stagnant, but at the same time, who doesn't love watching Paulo Banchero play some ISO ball? Like, overall, I agree. I wish they were on TV a little more.
The Wagners, too? I think the Wagners are pretty good TV.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the Rockets, the Hawks, the Bulls, the Jazz, the Nets, Hornets, Pistons, all your normal teams at the bottom here. The Blazers, the Raptors, and like we said, the Wizards are the least viewed team on national TV. No argument there. Like I said, the one is enough. You'll see about 5 minutes of Jordan Poole, just ultimate green light, and you'll be like, okay, this is why they don't win, and you'll probably change the channel. But unless you're a Wizards fan, and in that case, more power to you. But yeah, so those were just once again, another little quick topic to bring up. But Nerdy Dad, trust me, if you have more questions to throw in, you can definitely do that. Because so far, been some heater questions so far. All right, so I guess we can switch to NFL. Like I said, Nerdy Dad, if you have any other NBA questions, definitely throw those in the chat as well. All right, so Tua. We know a couple of years ago, had the injury issues with the concussions and all that. Questions about whether he'll continue to play. He plays last year. They have a good season. Playoff game, not so much. Burn that tape. He gets paid this offseason like a top-tier quarterback, which is now something he has to live up to. But he goes on and does an interview with Dan Le Batard, who's down in the Miami area, so you could probably put two and two together of where this is going. Asked Tua about like his relationship with Mike McDaniel and all this kind of stuff, and Brian Flores comes up. Tua basically goes on to say that Brian Flores was a terrible person. He said like Flores would tell him like he wasn't good enough, and he would hear that day after day, which he like alluded to it affecting his play on the field. And just kept kind of going down the road of lifting up Mike McDaniel, because he says like Mike McDaniel would never do anything like that. Mike McDaniel's all about uplifting him. And he's like, Brian Flores is always trying to push me down and make me feel worse about myself. Like I said, to encompass all that, do you have an issue with Tua saying that about Brian Flores? And obviously, to take into account all Brian Flores has been through, head coach of the Dolphins, has the grievance against the league because of the treatment from the Dolphins, what they fired him trying to get another head coaching job, and is now a defensive coordinator once again, even though every offseason when there's jobs available, everybody goes, Brian Flores should be a head coach, and then he gets passed over. So with all that taken into account, do you think Tua was out of bounds for saying what he said about Brian Flores?
I mean, if it's true, then no. Like, if it really happened, then It's something that it probably just gives us the insight as to probably why a big reason he's not a head coach. Because if he's just being a douche to all of his players and just rubbing them all the wrong way, then yeah, that spreads around the league. I'm sure that didn't just stay in Miami. I'm sure it's probably well known however he treats his players, and if he wasn't treating them right, then that's just kind of a Brian Flores problem. He's just self-sabotaging at that point. But I've always gone with if it's true, then I don't have an issue with it, because I'm sure this is something that's already known around the league, and it just gives us an insight as to why he's probably not getting a head coaching job outside of a grievance filed against the NFL. It just sounds like he rubs a lot of people and players the absolute wrong way. And if you're looking to be a head coach, which you have to be a leader of men, that's not a quality that you look for in your head coach. So overall, I don't have a beef with him coming out and saying that.
Okay. I mean, look, I get it if that's his, truth that he wanted to put out there. My issue with it was I don't know if doing it on like Dan Le Batard was the place to go about it. Like if you want to do the interview and talk about how great Mike McDaniel's been for your career, then do that. The stuff about Flores, like that's something he could have said like to Flores privately and been like, yeah, when you were the coach, I didn't like that you did this, this, and this to me. Because Brian Flores did come on and say like he's evolved from the Miami situation. And you gotta remember he came from the Patriots staff where he witnessed, Bill Belichick would get into Tom Brady just like everybody else. So that could just be an instance of he thought that's the way to do it and went to Miami and that was his approach. So I can't be mad at him for his first head coaching job because we've seen a lot of people who've come from the Patriots staff try to be like Bill at their first stop. For a lot of them, they fail at it, and for others, it works for them. But I just don't understand like why doing it on Le Batard makes sense. Because, like I said, you're not dealing with Brian Flores anymore. He's over in Minnesota doing his thing. You're in a better situation with Coach McDaniel. Then take it for what it is. The second aspect of it is, I guess, well, one you kind of alluded to, the reason for him not getting a head coaching job, and where you're dealing with a league that there's been so many issues with, people like Brian Flores getting opportunities. Throwing this out there, especially for those who may not have known the story, can paint maybe a worse picture of Flores than necessarily there needs to be. And, it does go to the grievance with the league, with the Dolphins, and how he was treated, basically like, forcing them to, lose games that he didn't want to, the not taking the guys that he wanted in the draft and everything like that. So there's a part of it that, like you said, I get it if this was Tua just being honest and just wanted to put it out there, fine. But like I said, you could have spoken to Flores privately about that and not put that out there to have it follow Flores around. Because who's to say now, opening week, after the game, a reporter doesn't go up to Brian Flores and now ask about the Tua situation, and it becomes a lingering storyline for him. And I feel like because of that and his ability as a coach, where he's trying to kind of distance himself from the Miami situation, this may do even more harm for Brian Flores' resume than, for Tua getting it off his chest or whatever. I guess that makes sense. Hold on. What's going on, Executioner? Appreciate you tuning in. Jury. The discourse around Brian Flores is completely different. It's not just sticking to football. There's a little extra level to it. He shouldn't have said that on that show. And Dan is baiting with that question, which you watch Dan Le Batard enough, you kind of understand what Dan's about. They both knew what they were doing. He had a valid reason to sue the Dolphins as well. They both did not have to do that, Tua and Dan. So, like I said, I don't know if that necessarily changes your answer in any way. Because, like I said, I get where you're coming from with, if Tua wanted to just be honest and open about it, that's fine. But like I said, I think what George alluded to as well is just that there's kind of been a stink on Brian Flores because of what happened in Miami and how it was kind of portrayed as he was the issue in a league where every offseason, because Eric Bieniemy and guys like that, there's always the question of how come they can't get opportunities. And now this is going to be something that's going to be used against Brian Flores like every time now. It's like every offseason, if he doesn't get a job, they'll be like, see, should have treated Tua better. Which, like I said, first head coaching job, trying to figure out his way. Yeah, maybe he learned that you can't treat every player the same way, Belichick treated Brady, because every player is different. And that's something as a coach you have to do, learn your players' personalities and know how to approach each of them. So,
yeah, it just sounds like with Brian Flores, probably just read the room a little better. Obviously, not everybody's Tom Brady.
right.
You can't. Tom Brady. He's just a completely different person, regardless to approaching everybody else. It seems so. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from too. So overall, just it's unfortunate that everything. It's just an unfortunate situation, and hopefully this helps Tua. Getting it off his chest if he's still holding resentment towards that. Hopefully this helps him get over it. Now he can move on, and hopefully Brian Flores can also get this away from him, and hopefully this is the start of maybe finally moving on from this situation.
Came across as an attack, an unnecessary one at that. Yeah, I feel like, if you look at the story about it, it just seemed like he just kept wanting to point out how bad Flores was. So yeah, and I can agree with that. I hope this was a one-time thing and not Tua constantly bringing this story up over and over every chance he gets, because then at that point it definitely would come across as, all right, Flores treated you a way that you didn't want, and it's like you're going to go out of your way to make sure he never gets another opportunity. So, well, I guess we'll have to see going forward, if this becomes something that Tua keeps rehashing, or if whatever. I mean, who knows? Maybe once the regular season starts, it's a non-issue.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Tua can go back to losing in December and January, and all be right in the world.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I'm also not the biggest. I'm not the biggest Tua fan.
Yeah, and look, with this interview and these quotes that came out, he probably made some, more people not necessarily like him, especially if you are in the camp that Flores as a defensive coordinator in Minnesota isn't what he should be doing. I do think he should definitely be an NFL head coach, especially looking at some guys who are coaching in the league. You have to think Flores is better, because even in that circumstance in Miami with, them basically sabotaging what he wanted to do down there, he still won games better than a lot of these guys are doing.
I'm under the assumption right now too. I still think Brian Flores should be a head coach, even with all the issues. He still found a way to win games, and if there was an issue with how he was treating the players, I'm very confident that he probably has learned from that, being a couple years now removed from the situation. So overall, I'm in the Brian Flores should be a head coach movement as well.
Yeah. We haven't heard any Vikings players say anything about bad about him. So clearly he's probably doing much better in Minnesota. But yeah, hopefully soon he's back coaching somewhere. Maybe Chicago. Not a fan of Eberflus. So maybe that's where he ends up. Yes. I think I alluded to that kind of quickly early on. Yeah, he did say he's evolved and changed, which is, hey, every experience is a learning experience. Okay. So I think now kind of just talk about some preseason like storylines and all this kind of stuff. I did want to start in Pittsburgh because now everybody's got the microscope on their quarterback situation. Russ versus Justin Fields. We've seen them play a couple of games. Who do you think is leading in that? Who do you think should have the starting job week one? I'm sure Mike Tomlin is sitting in his office like, can somebody just play a little bit better for a quarter or two? It's like, give me something to hold on to.
I think the answer right now is Russ, because I think Justin Fields still has some flaws that you throw him out there now and he's just not ready yet. Like, I like Justin Fields and I think he's a great talent, but I think he still needs some time to learn and just time to not only adapt to the Steelers system, but he still clearly has some bad habits that he brought over from Chicago. Like, he still holds onto the ball too long. And when he's trying to, create, he's only looking to run. He doesn't keep his eyes upfield. And he just, in general, has just very wonky throwing mechanics that he just tends to completely overshoot open receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And he still does a lot of things great. He's still a phenomenal athlete. He's still a phenomenal talent. And I completely believe in Justin Fields. But I think Justin Fields will be better off just sitting for a while, even if it's not him sitting the whole season. Let him watch Russ, continue to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe week 6 or 7 or after the bye week, whenever the Steelers bye week is, maybe bring him in then. But I think week 1, I think you roll out Russ for the Steelers.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well. I think I am a Russell Wilson fan. I hated seeing what he was doing last year in Denver. So I'm rooting for him to have a bounce back season this year. Now, unfortunately, I was also a Justin Fields guy and thought that he should have stayed in Chicago. So I'm like torn because one of them, I want them to have a bounce back year. But I do think because Fields is a little bit younger, he'll have more opportunities. Like, it seems like Russell Wilson is fighting for his NFL life with this job. Because if he fails in Pittsburgh, I feel like it's going to be about, Russ should retire. Russ is done. Because we were starting to hear that even last year. And I want to see Wilson do well. So I do agree that I think Russell will have the job week 1. Now, after that, we'll have to see. Obviously, his play will dictate how long he does keep that job. I guess another situation to talk about, the Dallas situation. It still continues on. Jerry's still, I mean, Jerry's just being Jerry at this point. He's not, he has no urgency still. CeeDee Lamb still unsigned. Nothing with Parsons, nothing with Dak. Like, do you think that the Cowboys would actually be bold enough to take this into the regular season at this point? Because the regular season starts in a couple of weeks here.
Yeah, I think they would absolutely be bold enough to take this into the regular season. And I think they probably will. I think Dak will probably get paid before the regular season. I think that situation resolves itself first. I think I've already watched enough Trey Lance football to last me a lifetime in preseason. And it turns out after all these years, Cooper Rush is still not a good quarterback. So right now, with how atrocious that QB play has been, I think Dak has all the leverage and, he'll get a deal done. He'll get real good money. Otherwise, he can just be like, well, I guess you can watch Trey Lance and Cooper Rush tank your contending window. But overall, I do think at least a couple of those are going to linger into the season, and I think it'll probably end up being CeeDee.
Yeah, I mean, look, hopefully that works out for him. I mean, Mike McCarthy's probably like, oh, no, another year where I got to deal with some type of drama around this team. What do you think would be the bigger distraction, I guess? CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. Well, I think Micah Parsons. I feel like he's whatever right now. Or Dak.
The biggest distraction, Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
The other two, I feel like, they'll complain about it, in the media or whatever. But Micah Parsons also has his own podcast, and I would not put it past him to start airing out grievances on his podcast. So overall, I think the one who has the biggest platform in terms of just media, and is not afraid to be very outspoken, is probably the right answer. So I'm going to go with Micah Parsons.
Okay. I actually think Dak might be the easiest one on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Dak just comes across like, all right, if you want me to play out the final year or whatever, I'll do that, and I'll just let my play speak for itself. Yeah, like you said, Mike is going to talk about it every chance he can, and
CD's already talking about it.
Yeah, so I can agree with that with Micah Parsons. All right, so something else around the league. Interested to get your opinion on the Bills, because the Bills, lot of transition this year. I kind of think Josh Allen is like out of sight, out of mind. You don't really hear a lot of people talking about him, and this is a guy that a couple of years ago was seen as one of the top quarterbacks in the league. So what are you expecting from Josh Allen going into this year, knowing that Diggs is no longer there, who was his number one target? He does have pretty good tight ends with Kincaid and Knox, but are you expecting Josh Allen to put up Josh Allen-like numbers, or do you think he takes a step back this year?
I think that he takes a step back, but I wouldn't be shocked if the overall offense actually improves a bit.
Okay.
That's the thing, right? They have Dawson Knox and Kincaid. That's two good tight ends that you have. You can always sign a running back if you're not a fan of James Cook, but in all reality, you should have a pretty lethal run game if you so choose to.
Yep.
And now instead of just force feeding, Stephon Diggs in crucial moments, I think he'll just replace it by spreading it around. Granted, the receiving room doesn't look great right now. Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, Valdez-Scantling. But I think the offense in general will be fine. I think Josh Allen's numbers will dip a bit, but I think the Bills' offense will actually end up doing much better than a lot of people think.
Yeah, they can definitely benefit from more balance to that offense. So I do agree that Allen probably does take a step back. I think with Josh Allen we'll get like two extremes. He'll either be comfortable taking a step back and more balanced offense, or he just goes off the deep end and just starts forcing passes left and right all season. And we see like crazy interception numbers. We see him visibly frustrated like each week, or we just see him like tuck and run like way too many times a game. But I do think that they take a step back, and I feel like he probably should be okay with that. But we'll see. It is Josh Allen. The arm punts aren't going to fully go away. He loves just throwing the ball downfield in triple coverage and gets picked off, and he just he's surprised it gets picked off. That's still going to happen. That's just who Josh Allen is. Now, this is a news story that I actually did not know, but Sunday NFL Countdown with ESPN, they named Mike Greenberg as the new host of it. How do you feel about that? I assume we'll probably just get a lot of Jets and Aaron Rodgers talk, because that's all Mike Greenberg cares about.
Jets.
Right. Because I guess that was what Ponder and Robert Griffin who did get released. But they're saying it's going to be Teddy Bruschi, Rex Ryan, Randy Moss, Alex Smith, Adam Schefter, and now Mike Greenberg.
I don't mind. I don't mind it. I think we'll just get a lot of I think we'll get heavy attention into the New York, media with the Jets. But overall, those guys do know what they're talking about when it comes to football. So in the end, I don't mind it.
Yeah, he and Rex Ryan will probably have a bromance that will,
Yeah.
be a little much. But yeah, I agree, Jory, that Rex does have his moments where he is very funny on there.
The Colts,
So Jory does bring up the Colts might stink. Do you agree with that?
yeah.
Or do you disagree? Okay. Yeah.
I think the Colts will probably stink this year.
Yeah.
I'm not high on them. I think teams are going to key in to stop the run, and they're going to force Anthony Richardson to be a passer, and I think that's where this offense ends up falling apart. I still think they'll win a decent amount. They'll probably at least still win at least 6 games or so, but I don't really have a high expectations for the Colts.
Yeah, me either. Because I mean, it's basically an extension of Anthony Richardson's rookie year, and going into his rookie year, I didn't think he had it necessarily arm talent wise. So there's no reason for me to think otherwise. So I do agree with you. You just gear up for Jonathan Taylor, force Richardson to beat you, and until he does, kind of run the same defense at him. Give him some blitzes in obvious passing situations to force him to think faster than he may want to, because you may force bad decisions that way. So yeah, I agree the Colts are going to stink. Yeah. So I mean, look, I guess sure if there's any other teams you want us to discuss, you can do that as well, or anybody else who is watching. They better stay healthy.
Stay healthy. Good luck. Say.
Let's see. I think there's another team I wanted to ask about. I'm trying to remember here. Unless it's the team you want to talk about. Oh, Jaden Daniels. Okay, so I did want to talk about the young quarterbacks of the league, because we know Caleb's going to start week 1. We learned the other day Jaden Daniels is going to be the week 1 starter for the Commanders. Drake May, there's a lot of reports that he's playing much better and practicing much better. We've seen Bo Nix with Denver look pretty good. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy got hurt. You didn't want to see that, but do you think that maybe this quarterback class was a bit underrated? Because remember, going into the draft, a lot of people thought it was like Caleb Williams and whatever else. Do you think that this quarterback class could prove to be better than people think?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, some of these guys have shown to be talented. Jaden Daniels is making a lot of really great throws. We saw some good stuff out of Drake May as well. Like, I think these quarterbacks have talent. The real question, I guess, is how high is their ceiling? Do we think that they're going to be Pro Bowl, All Pro, just solid? But yeah, I definitely think the notion of just Caleb Williams and a bunch of other guys was absolutely the wrong take this entire time. That's something I always thought. There's definitely talent to be had, and I definitely can't wait to see a bunch of these guys ball out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree that Daniels has looked really good. I was more of a Daniels guy than Caleb Williams coming into the draft, so I'm not necessarily surprised by that. I do think for Washington's situation, it's a good decision to start him week 1. Now, the Drake May stuff, obviously he was the 3rd quarterback taken. I understand if they're slow playing it with him because they don't want to repeat of the Mac Jones situation where he was put out there when the team around him wasn't all that good, and we saw how his tenure went in New England. But I do think he probably would be good enough to start early in the season as well. But yeah, I do agree that the young quarterbacks from this class, I think, will prove that they are better than we thought. I mean, look, Bo Nix was like a butt of a lot of jokes, and he looks like, the 10 years in college worked out for him. I mean, that's obviously feeding into the jokes about him, but he looks like a guy who, with all that experience, if you threw him out there week 1, he'll probably be really good at adapting to what he sees on the field and everything like that. Jory does bring up the Saints turning on Derek Carr. So I was going to ask, I guess not only about that situation, but do you think that, I guess, Derek Carr would be the biggest name starting quarterback that probably gets replaced first by their backup, or do you think there's another quarterback who might be worse off than Derek Carr?
As of right now, I think it's Carr. I think Carr ends up being the one just in trouble of getting replaced. And the sad part is, I don't think it'll be all his fault, really. I don't know if we've watched some offensive line play from the Saints this preseason. It was terrible. One thing that Derek Carr cannot do is he doesn't play well under pressure. And that's something he probably should learn how to do if he wants to, ball out. But overall, he just always struggles under pressure all these years. Well, the Saints, due to injury, have had to run Trevor Penning at tackle. They just drafted him last year. I can't say anything good about him. There was nothing good to say about him. He was absolutely terrible. He was absolutely getting dog walked by Jesse Luketa. I'll give anybody in the chat $5 if they can tell me what team Jesse Luketa fucking plays for. And not only that, they have Cesar Ruiz, who is, I'm not even kidding. I think he's either the best guard to ever play football or the worst guard to ever play football, depending on the play. He is so inconsistent. And I think that this is a marriage doomed to fail. Carr's not, fault-free himself, but I think this is a marriage doomed to fail because the Saints, unfortunately, I don't think they can protect Carr. And his one weakness, his big weakness, is throwing under pressure. So I think he's going to be under pressure all year. He's going to struggle. Alvin Kamara might lead the league in receptions. And they end up moving on from him because his numbers don't look great.
Yeah. And, you have Carr, you had his brother, David Carr, and, how beat up he got behind Texans O-line. That was terrible. I don't know. The one thing that may work in his favor is if you replace him, do you throw Spencer Rattler behind that line and expect him to develop in any way? So this might be a year where Carr just has to sacrifice his body and take all these hits until hopefully they can fix the line maybe next offseason. But I do agree that Saints fans will definitely turn on Carr pretty soon or pretty early into the season. Because being down here in Atlanta, Saints fans aren't going to necessarily play around, especially with as good as the Falcons look on paper. And Saints fans, if there's the one thing that they hate, are the Falcons. So the Falcons are doing well this year, and they stink. Yeah, they will definitely pin it on Carr and Dennis Allen too. He's obviously not going to avoid any of that as well.
Yeah, just for fun, I pulled up the blocking grades for the Saints O-line. For pass blocking. Guess what Cesar Ruiz's pass blocking grade is per PFF? This is absolutely hilarious. Even I didn't realize that this was this bad.
I'll go 26.
You were actually close. 27.
Oh wow. Okay.
Trevor Penning is not much better at a 40. And those two, that could very well be your starting tackle and guard tandem with the injury to Ramczyk. So,
yikes.
I think they need to upgrade really quickly.
Right. Yeah. With numbers like that, if you do fantasy football, Chris Olave might be a stay away from early on in the season. Because if Carr doesn't have time, that means Olave is not going to get a lot of targets, even though he's a very talented wide receiver. But, maybe the Alvin Kamara thing might be something to hold on to. A lot of screen passes.
The one team I'm looking forward to is, and this might be the first person to ever say this, Panthers. I want to see Bryce Young play with an actual competent group of receivers. And just hopefully a more competent team in general. Last year, was an absolute embarrassment of offensive line play and receivers. Like, I'm watching the Saints have 8 guys in the backfield. Immediately, I'm watching Jonathan Mingo jump out of bounds instead of trying to stay in bounds to catch the ball. The Panthers just were an absolute embarrassment last year, and I think they did great moves, getting Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette. And I'm really hoping that they just perform better. Like, give Bryce Young a fair chance and don't David Carr him out of this league.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote from Bryce Young where he said he is comfortable in the new offense, which is obviously a good start. Because I do agree with you. Like, it's weird how bad the Panthers were, but like they do have some talent at that wide receiver position that they did add to this year. So if they were able to find a way to protect him and give him his throwing lanes, because we know with his height that's going to be an issue, then yeah, they could be an interesting team to watch. And I mean, Jory does bring up kind of like where you alluded to, like the offensive line's going to have a big effect on whether or not he's a good quarterback this year. Because yeah, we saw Drew Brees deal with it being a shorter quarterback, but he obviously found a way to still put up numbers. I'm not saying Bryce Young is Drew Brees in any way, but he was taken number 1 overall. He had a lot of success at Alabama. It's hard to think that he and a team that he's on could be as bad as the Panthers were last year. So maybe the new coach, brings a new way of talent evaluation, all that, and they can start getting the right pieces there now. Because yeah, like you said, and I brought up a little earlier, the Derek Carr experience is not something you want a young quarterback to go through. That guy took a beating his first season, and it clearly affected his development, and he was never really as good as his draft position would tell you. So like I said, not saying that's going to happen to Bryce Young, but I would like to see some sort of progress this year from Carolina.
Yeah, maybe the next step is I still think they need to get Bryce Young a tight end. Because obviously that was very instrumental for Drew Brees, getting him Jimmy Graham and letting those two develop insane chemistry together. So I would love to see them go out and, try to get themselves a really good tight end if they have the chance.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually the formula for a young quarterback. You get them a tight end that they can just dump it over the middle to when everything just, goes down the toilet. And if they can find that for him, then yeah, he should be better off. Plus a running back, get him a good running back and an O-line, and you're kind of starting off pretty well. I mean, Justin Fields learned that in Chicago. Bad O-line. We did mention earlier, Justin Fields had his own issues, but a lot of that came from an O-line that I feel like he would drop back and he just assumed he was being rushed, so he just kind of scrambled around. I'm Sam Darnold against the Patriots, the famous broadcast, seeing ghosts. Like, yeah, you don't want that for Bryce Young. Okay. Let's see. So I guess going along the lines of, what you're talking about, the Panthers, I guess who do you think may be kind of like an under the radar type of team that could be really exciting this season?
Under the radar team that could be really exciting. It's a really good question. Let me cheat real quick and pull up a list of teams.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I feel like we have that every year. There's a team that gets completely misjudged by the media and all the pundits and stuff, and they play a couple of games, and you're like, this team's not as bad as you think. Some of them even turn that into a surprise playoff performance or something like that. So I do think there's a few candidates possibly.
Honestly, with the way honestly, it really just might be the Panthers.
Okay.
I really believe in Bryce Young and his talent, and even in a shaky situation, it really showed.
Mm-hmm.
If these receivers, like Deontay Johnson and Leggett can help them out and gain separation, and overall just they did address the offensive line a bit. If all
Mm-hmm.
that they actually get them some protection, then I think the Panthers, because they already have a really good defense. I think the Panthers defense, if I'm not mistaken, was really good last year. So if they can fix their offensive issues this year and even have a competent offense, the Panthers could make a decent run at maybe a wild card spot.
Okay. I mean that look from where Carolina has been, with Tepper, they move Burns, their best defender, their best pass rusher. If they could linger around playoff spot, that would definitely be a big win for them. I mean, I know for me, obviously outside of my Patriots, everybody's like 4-13. Maybe they get to 5, but I do think like a team like a Tennessee or I mean, I don't know, even like the Chargers seem like they're kind of the Chargers seem like they're kind of under the radar while on the radar because of the Jim Harbaugh move. But Tennessee is a team that has put together an interesting roster that I do think, if everything completely hits perfectly, they could be a very interesting team to watch this year.
You know what I'm waiting for that's going to be absolutely hilarious? By the way, I love the answer of the Titans. They're on my radar as well. I think outside of the quarterback situation, I actually think the Giants have a solid team. I think Neighbors is going to help that wide receiver room a ton. I think they have one of the best front sevens in football. I think overall that's a really talented team. And I think it would be the funniest thing ever if they were the team that all of a sudden did really good this year. Because could you imagine all of a sudden they make the playoffs again and Daniel Jones come, well, I want more money now. I took you to the playoffs.
I mean, I'm sure Giants fans probably aren't rooting for that because I feel like they are just done with Daniel Jones. But yeah, that they are kind of a weird team like that. Defensively, pretty good. They, last year the worst thing about them was outside of quarterback was their wide receiver room. Neighbors seems like a guy who's going to be really good at this level. So if you can get Daniel Jones to finally, put it together, or if you can capture the Tommy DeVito magic he had last year over the course of 17 games, then yeah, maybe they are better off. And plus, we just talked about the Cowboys. If the Cowboys take a step back because Dak and these guys don't play or are rusty to start the season, yeah, maybe the Giants can steal. I think they play the Cowboys early on. If they steal something like that, the team becomes a confident group. You never know. I'm not necessarily going to bet on it because it's the Giants and it's Daniel Jones. It's a lot to ask of Daniel Jones to be competent, but I definitely can see what you're saying about that.
Yeah, Daniel Jones himself looked terrible. Like that pick six that he threw, just beginning to end, was terrible because that should have just never happened. Yeah. The man had all the room to step up in the pocket and deliver a strike. It was a fine pocket, but instead he scrambles into the contain and starts just running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Now all of a sudden the pressure's there, and then he just lollipops one over to his check down, which at that point, it's just not things that you should be seeing from your quarterback in your 6th year. If you were a rookie, that would have been terrible. Mm-hmm. But Daniel Jones is like I said, year 5 or 6 or something like that. He should know better by now. Okay, come on, man. Yeah. If worst case scenario, just throw up a jump ball. I'm sure there's somebody had a one-on-one across the field. If you throw a pick deep, taking a chance, nobody's going to care. At least it doesn't lead to the disaster that was that pick six.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think one thing that the Giants will kind of regret is not have, because wasn't Tyrod Taylor on that team last year?
Yeah.
I think they may miss the fact that they let him go to the Jets of all places. So he went to the in-state rival. But I think Tyrod Taylor is a good quarterback. He's just had some of the worst luck, in league history with some of the things that's happened to him. I feel like he's a guy that probably could win some games with the Giants, especially with how we've seen Daniel Jones look last year and look going into this year. There's no reason to be optimistic that he's going to play well again. And with his price tag as well, like that's a lot for Daboll, who's coaching for his job there, to have to deal with. So, we'll see what the Giants do, but not expecting a lot of happy Giants fans this year. Yeah. Unless there's another team you wanted to bring up or a player or something. Oh, I actually did have one. The Jags. Like Trevor Lawrence, who I think he's another guy that slowly is sliding into irrelevancy.
It's a make or break year for him.
I completely agree with that. That's kind of where I was going to go with this. Like, could this be? Is this like his Daniel? Is he like at like the Daniel Jones fork in the road right now? Like, if he has a really good season, he can regain some of the hype that he had coming out of Clemson, winning a national title and all that. But if he struggles again this year, are we going to have to start bringing up that, 4-letter word that a lot of these athletes don't like? Bust.
Yeah, I think, like I said, obviously this isn't a fork in the road for him in terms of if he's gonna, because he signed an extension, so he's stuck with the Jags for a while. They're stuck with each other. But I think in terms of public opinion, absolutely, because if he fails to do anything this year, or maybe we give him an extra year, but time's definitely running out for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, granted, there were a lot of issues with the Jags outside of Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't perfect, but the Jags also, had really bad drop issues last year, and their line wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think a lot of issues do stem from T-Law, and I think that time is running out on him. I still believe that he can turn it around, but I think he has to show everybody something this year if he wants to start turning around his public opinion here.
Does he need a playoff appearance?
He already won a playoff game at least. I don't think he necessarily needs a playoff appearance. I think he just needs to play well. Like, if he makes it to the playoffs, that's great. But if he can put up, even if he can start this year by just being consistent and putting up really good numbers and overall just passing the eye test, like, that would be a great start for him in the right direction. And honestly, if he does that, the playoff appearance will just follow. Like, that Jags team doesn't look terrible. I think that's going to be a fine Jags team if he can be consistent. So overall, I think those two things go hand in hand.
Okay. I guess follow-up would be, does he, well, I'm trying to think of the answer before I ask this. Okay. Is he maybe the quarterback under the most pressure this year?
Quarterback under the most pressure. That's tough. Like, in terms of like public opinion, probably.
Okay.
Like, because overall, like, there's a couple quarterbacks that came to mind when you said under the most pressure. Obviously, we already talked about Russ.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he's going to really have to put in a great year to avoid the washed label.
Yeah.
I think another guy who's going to be under a lot of pressure, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
If he wants to avoid, negative labels of his own. But Trevor Lawrence definitely has to be up there if he wants to prove everybody wrong and show that he was worthy of the number one pick, then yeah, he has to be up there on quarterback under the most pressure.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I do agree. Public opinion, he is probably up there, but there are actually quite a few of them. I mean, you named most of them. I mean, we talked about Daniel Jones. He's under a lot of pressure. I mean, look, I'd still say Lamar's under a lot of pressure until he makes the Super Bowl.
I don't think
Multi-
Daniel Jones is under that much pressure. I feel like the issue is I don't think people have any expectations of Daniel Jones at this point.
That's fair.
And I think the Giants, I know they were talking about it on, they tried to pass it off as on Hard Knocks about them going forward with Daniel Jones, but they kind of have to say that. So overall, I think there's zero expectations for Daniel Jones to do anything. And I think the Giants know that as well. I think as soon as they can next year, they'll probably just go draft their actual quarterback of the future. So if anything, he's under pressure if he wants to stay in the league and get a backup role.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, I was factoring in, the market of New York, the fan base of the Giants that, haven't necessarily been the most successful, but they did go through the Eli Manning years where they were bad for a lot of them, but he did give them 2 rings. So, I don't know, fair or not, they're looking at Daniel Jones. They're looking at a team with another good defense, which a lot of those Eli Manning teams had pretty good defenses. And they're just like, can you just not be part of the problem? Like that's basically all they need Daniel Jones to be. Like, just don't go out there, throwing stupid interceptions, much less pick sixes, fumbling the ball. Like, just be a, I don't know, average quarterback. Middle of the road. We don't need you to be excellent in anything. Just be middle of the road, but take care of the ball. And because of that defense and everything, they can probably win some games. Now, whether or not he can do that, I don't know. Okay, let's see. I was looking up where you were talking about the defense. I do think I remember the Panthers had a pretty decent defense last year. Let's see. That's fantasy draft rankings. Okay. Obviously, the Panthers aren't going to necessarily be at the top of that. There we go. Team defense stats. Let's see what we got here.
PFF had them tied for 19th in the league.
Oh, okay. I mean,
that's preseason. Never mind. Hold up.
Oh, okay. I think the one I went to had preseason at first, and I was like, what? Well, that's not what I wanted. Okay.
There you go. 2023 regular plus postseason. Let's see what their defense was. Oh, 16th.
Okay. Yeah, middle of the pack. Like, they weren't terrible.
Yeah. Remember correctly, there's a lot of young talent on that team as well, with room for improvement. So I could see that going up.
Right. Trying to see how many points did they give up a game last year? They gave up 25 a game. Yeah, I mean, they should probably be able to improve upon that. They were 4th worst in terms of points per game. Like I said, young players, maybe they're better off their second season. I mean, like, not everybody can be Baltimore with 16.5 points a game last year, which that defense was just nuts. But I think something to kind of look at during the season, like if their defense does improve, especially if their passing game can improve from last year. I think all else fails, like Carolina is a team like you can just check on every Sunday, just kind of see what they're looking like. I feel like they'll be one of those teams.
Yeah, we that man, I was playing Madden. That Ravens defense is no joke. Ironically, I still won. That was my first ever win came against the Ravens and their defense, and I couldn't. It was tough to move the ball. I won because the guy tried to make Lamar like a volume passer instead of a runner, and I picked him off 3 times and got myself good field position.
Hey, look, EA's accurate with that one, huh?
Like he just kept like hitting the wrong button and doing lob passes into the flats. So I'm like, "Yep, we're gone."
I mean, look, we got like a few minutes, so we can definitely talk some Madden. I haven't gotten it yet, so I was gonna ask like first impressions on the game.
It's fun. I've definitely enjoyed it so far. Overall, I think they've underrated my Packers a bit. Our O-line is not as bad as the game likes to make them be, but
yeah.
No, overall it's a fun experience. I've enjoyed it so far.
Okay.
You know what's funny?
It's definitely good.
The first game I played, it was somebody. I actually thought of you because I played the Patriots online. I got absolutely walloped 22-6 in my first game I ever played in 25 against the Patriots.
The fact that people are using them does make me encouraged to see that. Because look, last year I played people online. Everybody used the Chiefs, the Niners, or the Ravens. That's who everybody used. I never ran into it. Well, I mean, I use the Patriots only because I'm just that person. But if you're meeting them online, they must have something going for them.
Right? No, and that's the thing. Like, I know how to guard, like, the Ravens and 49ers. Like, I've played them enough. I can guard those teams very well against most teams. I've never played the Patriots before, so I had absolutely no clue what to do. Because everything I did was like, oh, okay, it turns out they have a really good O-line. I can't get past them. I can't blitz right now. Okay. Because that was the issue I had. It didn't matter. Like, I could blitz them. I could rush 4. I just wasn't getting back to the quarterback at all, which caught me off guard. And it was my first game.
I actually thought they're going to have their O-line be terrible in the game, but hey, if they're holding up, then
no, they held up. They held up against me very well, a lot better than I thought they would, and it was annoying.
Okay, I'll take it.
I'll say maybe they were just like, maybe they're just on one because they were playing me, but.
I mean, I don't know, maybe like the line adjustments and everything, like they were just
the
user was just hitting on all of them, which I do think like that's a good part of it.
I love the line adjustments.
Yeah,
like the half and full adjust. They added that in College 25, and they brought that over to Madden. Love it.
Yeah, I think it does help out a lot, especially if you know what you're doing. Then you can obviously help out maybe ratings wise a bad O-line, but you can scheme around it, which that's what teams do, in the NFL anyway. Scheme around your weaknesses to try to win games anyway. So I feel like that's kind of a good place to end the episode. So, I mean, Brett, do you have anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, go to my page and check out the Meaty Boys podcast starting at 8:15. So, like 35 minutes from now.
Okay. I mean, once again, wrestling, they had a good Raw episode. We got the whole Bloodline storyline, which is captivating every week. I know I saw like the Randy Orton, Gunther stuff, interesting. So definitely a lot going on in WWE. Triple H once again is still on a heater. So I'm sure you guys have a lot to talk about. For me, like I said, I will be on here Thursday. Bases loaded. We also have sideline to sideline where you can catch us on there where we will talk strictly NFL over there. Friday with Jory in the chat, got Passion and Precision. We did our playoff predictions, so we'll dive into those a little bit more. We might even go ahead and do a way too early Super Bowl prediction. I don't know. We'll kind of see. But yeah. So look, it was another great episode. appreciate all of you that were in the chat. What was it? I don't want to mess up the name, but the questions earlier. Who was that?
Oh, Nerdy Dad.
Nerdy Dad. Yes. Definitely appreciate you tonight because those questions, obviously not being on the slate, they were really good. So hopefully you come back next week, bring some more questions for us. We definitely would appreciate that. Dylan, hopefully we'll be back next week. So we'll have the full crew. But for Brett and myself, like you said, make sure you check out Meaty Boys for all your wrestling news and everything at 8:15. Well, it's 8:15 Central, so 9:15 Eastern. But yeah, another edition. Come back next week, 7 o'clock for another episode of the On the Ball podcast. Enjoy the rest of your night. We are out of here. See ya.